The third session. All right.
I've been told to eat the mic. I will try to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. It's I don't do this that often, so it's not like second nature, but it's better than wearing that thing on your ear. Okay. All right. Divine imaging is another core concept that actually builds off of and upon the divine counsel idea. Before we jump in here, to really grasp this, it's one thing abstractly to think about, oh, God has a counsel, that he's up there somewhere, he's in the spiritual realm, and there are other Elohim with him. Those Elohim serve him, they do what he tells them to do. I mentioned last time, we're going to get into it here, that they also are given the latitude to participate in the governance of the spiritual world, and even as it intersects with our world. But there's just more to it than that. And the more that I think for our purposes is really significant is that God's heavenly counsel pre-existed the creation as we know it. We know that from Job 38, the sons of God were present when the foundations of the earth were laid. And our initial status, our initial relationship, probably be a better way to put it, at least at this point in our talk, is sort of modeled off of God's relationship with his intelligent, unseen family. This whole concept of God as family that begins in Eden, again, has an analogy. And humanity was not put here to displace God's counsel, at least the original intent, because those members were loyal to God. God's intention was to have his human imagers, and I'll explain what that means in a moment, but his human children, his human imagers, coexist and live alongside and serve alongside his non-human imagers and his non-human family. This is the antecedent, ultimately, for why believers are called sons of God, just like they are, just like the non-human divine beings of God's original family were. This language that we throw around as Christians that we're very familiar with, family terminology, service terminology, it all has antecedents in the Old Testament, and in some surprising places too. Again, I'm just giving you the overview here. If you want, the nuts and bolts, the detail, and lots of other things, you'll have to go through the book. But divine imaging as a concept. Let's just jump in here to Genesis 1:26, familiar passage. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the air, and over livestock, over all the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. So in 1:26 we have a plural language, us and our. And in 1:27 it goes to singular. So we're going to talk about that in relation to what this thing called the image of God is. Now, again, everybody has sort of an idea of what the image is. You'll come across lots of different views and theories of this. I personally don't think it's as difficult as a lot of theologians have made it. But what you need is, whatever the image is, whatever that language means, is a better way to say it, it has to make humankind distinguishably and certifiably unique in relation to any created thing that makes the physical universe its home. And the uniqueness is really going to be tied to Earth, obviously, because that's where we live. You need every member of the human race to possess this image, or again, whatever that is, equally and to the same extent. And this image thing must be something shared with God's own being and nature. This is what you need in any definition, any coherent definition of this subject. And I'm going to suggest to you, here's what doesn't fit those criteria. Intelligence or rationality, because we don't all possess those things equally. The little couple-celled conceptus after the act of sexual intercourse that most believing Christians would want to affirm is sacred, sanctity of human life. That little thing inside the woman that has been fertilized and, without intervention or some sort of genetic problem or disease or injury, or of course something like abortion, will become a human being because that's what it is genetically. It's not anything else. It's a human life. That's what it is genetically. But it doesn't have a brain. It doesn't have a brain. So if we're going to link the image, the thing that theologians want to say makes life sacred, if we're going to link that to intelligence, how do we do that? It doesn't have a brain. How can it be rational? Emotions. We know that our emotions, come from our brains. That's the ultimate point of origin. Doesn't have one of those. Ability to know God, pray, can't do that. Possession of a soul. Well, it depends what that is. Consciousness. It doesn't really have consciousness either, because that also has some connection to the brain. And by the way, the nephesh of Genesis 1, animals also have that too. Nephesh and ruach are interchangeable in the Old Testament. Sorry if you're a trichotomist, but that's just where the Old Testament's at. Seat of emotions, intelligence, rationality, all that gets described equally with either nephesh or ruach. So if you don't have, again, the thing that enables human beings to be conscious and have those experiences, that you're sort of out of luck if this is the way you're going to define the image. On the other side of life, what if you lose those capabilities? If you lose the image, ability to communicate, same deal. What it comes down to, without belaboring the point too much, is if you define the image of God as any attribute that has to be acquired or will be acquired along the way from the moment of fertilization to birth to adulthood, you have a problem. Because those capacities are not going to be either unique to humanity or will not be equally shared at the same time with all humans at all stages of life. So at best, what you have is a potential human person that's sacred. Well, the fetus or the conceptus will have all this stuff eventually. Yeah, it will. So why are you pro-life? You should be pro-birth. Okay? Because birth, that's when you sort of get that stuff. You have a problem with the whole discussion of the sanctity of life if you define the image of God as a thing given to you, or a thing that develops in, during, and after birth. You have a problem. And again, because those things can be lost. Again, equally, have to be equal, have to be actual, and have to be distinguishable and certifiably unique to humankind. So you have a problem. So what is it? Let me suggest to you a better way to understand this, one that, sad to say, derives from a point of Hebrew grammar. Try not to snooze, and you guys don't, because you're into Hebrew. At least most of you, I think, will enjoy this. But it's all about the preposition. It's all about the preposition. Let us make man in our image after our likeness. Okay? This little preposition in, whether we have plural language or after, is going to be significant. As in English, prepositions in Hebrew are used to denote different semantics, different concepts, different ideas. So look at these four in English. Put the dishes in the sink. How am I using the preposition in there? Locative. Okay. has something to do with location. Something is written in pencil. The means or the instrument, something like that. Instrumentality. He wrote the vase in pieces. That denotes the result. Here's what to say in reply. Either a purpose or a process or an outcome is what you were getting at. Okay. Here's one. I work in accounting. What it really means is I work as an accountant. That is my function. That is my role. That is my capacity. Okay, functionality. So the point is, taking that back to Hebrew, this is called the bet of identity, or the bet essentia in grammar speak. It's the idea of the preposition bet denoting function, purpose, or role, something like that. Function is a good way to put it. We should understand Genesis 1:26 and 27 as meaning that humankind was created to function in the capacity of the image of God. In other words, we represent God. That's our role, to sort of be Him in His place, to represent Him, to do the things that He wants us to do. Okay? All of it points to a functional sense as opposed to a qualitative approach to the imaging. Now, again, humanity shares certain communicable attributes to enable that representation. God says, I'm going to make humankind, and ultimately humankind is created and has His image. Well, to represent Him, we're going to need some things. We're going to need certain attributes. One of them is freedom. You have to be able to make legitimate decisions, intelligence, These are communicable attributes. That's the theological term for attributes that God possesses that He shares with people. We don't possess them to the same extent, obviously. And, frankly, because of the plural language here that we'll talk about in a moment, God's divine family also represents Him. They also possess these faculties. That's part of the reason for the plurality, to sort of bring them into the discussion. And you almost never see the image of God talked about in theology books where it includes the members of the heavenly host. But they have the same capacities as well. Now, again, that doesn't mean we're all equal. Even those of us in the room, we're all human, but we don't possess, again, the attributes that we share with God equally. We have different abilities, we have different capacities. Some of us are good at A, others are good at B, others are really terrible at B. We're all different, even though we're human. But we all possess some of these attributes in some measure. Again, all things being equal. We're not, unless we lose some of this functionality or this ability through a disease or something like that. And we're just taking the general discussion. So, if we look at imaging, again, as status or function, we represent God. That's our place, that's our function. What is it? Well, I would suggest, think of it as a verb. Think of imaging like a verb. It's something that you're able to do. You're able to represent God. You're able to function in that capacity. So think of it as activity, and it'll help you get the idea. So how? Well, again, shared attributes. And I bring up free will because we're heading into another subject about rebellion in a moment. And when I use the term, I'm simply referring to the ability to make a conscious choice without that choice being predestinated or coerced. It's a legitimate decision. You're able to do that. And I would suggest to you that is essential. That is essential to divine imaging. If you do not have genuine free will, you cannot image God. You will not be like Him. If you remove that, you are not like Him. So, to define that away, or diminish it, or ignore it, or do something with it that theologians like to do, again, to dispense with it. The ability to make a choice is intrinsic to imaging God, to representing Him. God is not a robot. He is not an automaton. Neither are we. We are able to represent Him because He shares who He is with us, even though it's a far lesser extent. And of course, we don't have His nature. We not only don't possess these things exhaustively, but we also don't have His nature. That's going to become a factor in a moment. This means that rebellion is possible. We can make choices that are bad, that we shouldn't make, that God knows we're going to make, but since He created us with the ability to make the decision, He knows what could result. He is not taken surprise when humanity rebels. He is not taken by surprise when divine beings rebel. He knows that possibility exists. He can foresee it. But to stop it, He would have to remove the imaging status from us. He'd have to eliminate imaging. He's already made the decision. There is no plan B. Okay, God is going to stick with the plan. This is ultimately why there is evil in God's world. There is evil in God's world not because God is behind you, nudging you to evil, not because God has predestinated the rape of a little child, okay, not because God has predestinated the Holocaust and it has to happen because God needs it to happen for something else to happen. Bad things happen because free will imagers abuse the good gift of God. That's why evil happens. It is not God's fault, it's our fault. You say, well, couldn't God, originally, back in Eden, couldn't He have just, done away with this? Yeah, but you understand what I'm getting at. What that means is, to eliminate the problem of evil means to eliminate humanity. It means to eliminate, God's divine family as well. It means to erase them as they exist and as they were created. Now, God could do that. And God could do that. He has the power to do that. But what does it say? It says to anybody left, as if there would be, but let's just say God decides to wipe out humans. So then the members of the council, again, God's non-human family, look at that and go, well, you probably needed to do that. Just not a good idea. Can you imagine someone saying to God, that idea you had, it was kind of bad, it was kind of dumb. Okay, by the way, this is what's going on in the book of Job. We have a divine being in the presence of the council, the Satan, who is not the devil of the New Testament. Satan just means an adversary. Gets uppity, questions whether God has assessed Job correctly, questions, again, God's judgment. Now, God could just say, goodbye. Going well. Okay. He could do that, but you know what? If He does that, you know what happens? The question is still on the table. God took the easy way out. He eliminated the offender. But that doesn't answer the question, does it? So the rest of the book of Job is really about vindicating God's wisdom, vindicating God's knowledge of Job, vindicating God's character. But Job suffers as a result. But you, the reader, know why he's suffering. He's suffering because the Satan has to be shown to be wrong. And he has to allow Job to suffer anything up to death because you can't have this question appear on the table. Oh, well, if you'd have done that to Job, then he would have, cursed you. No. It has to go all the way. There can't be any other question left on the table. God must be shown to be correct. And you go all the way back to, again, the situation in Eden. Yeah, God could just intervene and say, well, enough of this. But God doesn't do that. because his decision to create humanity is not a bad idea. He doesn't want anyone to leave, to have the impression that I made a boo-boo. I had a bad day. He knows what's going to happen, and for some reason, God likes the idea of creating non-human and human beings like him, to assist him in what he does, and to enjoy what he creates. He doesn't need them. He just likes the idea. He just wanted to do that. He wanted to share who he was, and who he is, and what he's about with somebody else who could appreciate it. Now, all of that is wrapped up in more things, as we'll see, with imaging. The last note here was about participation in a moment. Why the plurals? Let's just backtrack one little pace here. Let us create humankind as our image, basically to be our image. So God is, the plurals are there because God is announcing his intention to the beings who already exist. Members of the heavenly host, the sons of God from Job 38, who were there before the foundation of the world. God says, here's what I want to do. Let's create humankind as our images. Now, as soon as the plurals are used, it links humanity, it links the members of the heavenly host, and it links God in some way. There's going to be some sort of shared relationship. Humans are going to be functioning as our imagery. But then in 27, humankind is created as his imagery, as God's imagery. Here's the point. Divine beings, again, also share God's attributes. We represent the council, which is really the will of God. The council members are just the ones who carry out the will of God in the unseen world. And we also represent God here on earth. The council carries out God's decrees. If they have an impact on earth, if they involve us, we represent them and him. We are part of the home office. We are part of the family business, which started in Eden. Because that's where God's house was, so to speak, where God lives. Where God lives, the council is. In his presence, there are those who surround the throne. All this scriptural imagery. We're going to go real fast here. This is where God lives and where he works. And this is the headquarters. This is where it starts in Eden. So the original intent is that we all be one family with one purpose. Humanity's purpose was, hey, your job is to make the rest of the world like this place. Like Eden. You realize the earth is not Eden. Eden is not the earth. Eden has geography, according to Genesis 2. Eden is a little piece of earth. And God says, I want you guys to multiply, because it's a big job. Multiply and make every place on the planet like this place. Because I want to fill up the earth with imagers who can enjoy it and take care of it. And won't that be cool? And you know what? While you do that, these other guys, they're going to be here too. And you'll get to interact with them like you interact with me. Genesis in the garden, how does God do that? He walks in the garden. It's anthropomorphic language. He appears to them as a man. It's very consistent with what else follows elsewhere in the Old Testament. They know when he's there, they can process him, all that kind of thing. We're going to live together and enjoy this place. Take care of it. It'll be great. And you have equal status with all of us who, we're superior in significant ways. But I'm going to treat you just like you belong here because you do. Now let's go to it. Of course, that doesn't last very long. Because one member of the divine family doesn't really like the idea. We're not told too much of the specifics as to why, but the plan is real simple. I'm going to go ahead of myself. I'm going to go there anyway. The plan's real simple. You know, there's that tree of life. You know, these humans here, they have contingent immortality. They're going to stay alive as long as they don't sin, and as long as they don't do anything stupid. Making breakfast one day and an elephant tromps by and trips and falls on Adam. Adam doesn't just get up and say, "Oh, that's kind of funny." No, he's crushed because he's human. He can bleed. He has to breathe. He's not the gill man, okay? He's human. So the enemy, the adversary, says, you know what? The easiest way to get rid of them is to get them to sin. Just go out and destroy them. Easy plan. Makes perfect sense. And the way we get them to do that is I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to steer circumstances to make that happen. We'll come back to that. Again, we're back here to the imaging idea. It's like we are representatives of God. Again, we share this status with the other members of the heavenly host. But ultimately, whether it's the council or God himself, it's all representation of God because he created everybody in both groups, and they participate with him to do what he wants. Okay? These aren't real difficult concepts. They're familiar, but we're not used to including the members of the heavenly host with it. Participatory sovereignty is the way I like to think of it. I think of back-ending sovereignty. Here's what I mean. Sovereignty allows freedom of imagers, and foreknowledge does not necessitate predestination. Two big concepts here. We'll take you to some passages. First thing about participation. Two good examples of divine council participation where it affects things on earth. 1 Kings 22:19. This is where God has decreed, God has decided that it's finally time for Ahab to go. Ahab is notorious. It's finally time for this guy to buy the farm and just die. So, if you go to 1 Kings 22:19, look it up. We have a divine council meeting. Micaiah the prophet says, I saw the Lord. He was there, his heavenly host standing around him, and they're referred to as spirits. They're spirit beings. And God says, again, my paraphrase, time for Ahab to die. I've had it. Okay, his time is up. How do we do that? Okay, and there's a conversation. The account says one spirit said one thing to the other, and they're going back and forth, and all of a sudden, a spirit steps forward. Oh, I got it! I got it. I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets. Now, the reason is that when these prophets lie to him, Ahab will go up to this battle and get killed. God says, yeah, that'll work.